You're nothing but a stain here. Seraphina Thorne's voice sliced through the opulent halls of the Thorne mansion, her words as sharp as the slap that seared Anya's cheek. The third wife of a billionaire, Seraphina, ruled with venom, her cruelty a tempest of insults, shattered vases, and icy water flung at the young black maid. Yet Anya, the 100th servant to face this storm, stood unbroken. Her silence was defiance, her resilience a mystery. Will her strength crack the walls of Seraphina's rage, or will it ignite a reckoning? Hit that subscribe button and share where you're tuning in, day or night, city or countryside. Let's unravel this together. Can a single photo spark redemption? Will a tyrant's heart soften? Stay with us to discover if hope can bloom in a house of thorns. What's your guess for their fate? The Thorne mansion loomed like a cathedral of wealth, its marble floors gleaming under chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears. In the grand foyer, Maria, a frail woman with trembling hands, stood frozen as Seraphina Thorne's palm cracked across her cheek. The slap echoed, sharp and final, a sound that had broken 99 souls before her. You call this clean? Seraphina's voice, cold as the jade pendant at her throat, cut deeper than the blow. Her pale skin flushed with disdain, her emerald eyes narrowing at the smudge on a silver tray Maria had polished for hours. Maria's apron fell to the floor, a white flag of surrender as she stumbled out, tears blurring her path to the heavy oak doors. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, watched from the shadows, her gray hair pulled tight, her lips a thin line of resignation. She'd seen this scene too many times. Picking up the phone, she dialed the agency with a sigh. Send the next one, she said, her voice heavy with the weight of failure. Yes, the 100th. By noon, Anya arrived. She stood in the foyer, her dark skin catching the light filtering through stained glass windows, her posture steady despite the invisible storm awaiting her. Her braided hair was neat, her eyes calm but unyielding, like a lake hiding depths no one dared plumb. Mrs. Gable met her with a curt nod, her gaze flickering with something like pity. Mrs. Thorne is particular, she warned, her voice low. Mind your step, girl. She breaks people like glass. Anya's only response was a slight incline of her head, her silence louder than words. The air shifted as Seraphina descended the spiral staircase, her silk dress whispering against the marble. The third wife of billionaire Julian Thorne, she carried herself like a queen, her white skin stark against the green fabric, her beauty a weapon honed to wound. She sized Anya up, her lips curling as if tasting something bitter. You're the new one, she said, not a question but a challenge. Let's see how long you last. The first test came at dusk. In the dining hall where gold-rimmed plates gleamed under candlelight, Seraphina sat with a coffee cup balanced in her manicured hand. Anya moved silently, setting a tray of pastries nearby. Without warning, Seraphina's wrist flicked. Dark liquid arced through the air, splattering across the Persian rug, a crimson stain blooming on cream wool. Clumsy fool, Seraphina snapped, though her eyes glinted with intent. Clean it. Now. The room held its breath. The other staff, maids, footmen, even the cook peering from the kitchen, froze, waiting for Anya's collapse. But Anya didn't flinch. Her movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, as she knelt with a cloth, her dark hands working the stain with precision. The coffee vanished, the rug restored, as if the act had never happened. Seraphina's jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the armrest. Faster next time, she hissed, but her voice betrayed a crack, a hint of unease at Anya's unshaken calm. The staff whispered as Anya left the room. She didn't cry, one maid murmured. Not a word, said another. Mrs. Gable watched, her eyes narrowing, as if seeing something new in the 100th maid. That night, in the cramped attic room assigned to her, Anya sat on a narrow cot, the mansion's grandeur replaced by peeling paint and a single flickering bulb. She pulled a worn photograph from her pocket, its edges frayed from countless touches. David, her younger brother, grinned in the image, his smile bright despite the hospital bed framing him. His brown eyes, so like hers, held a spark that kept her tethered to this place. She traced his face, her lips curving faintly. For you, she whispered, her voice a vow in the dark. A soft knock broke her reverie. Mrs. Gable stood at the door, her face softer than before, her eyes searching Anya's. "I've seen them come and go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 99 broken by her hand. "Don't let her see you're afraid. That's what she feeds on." Anya met her gaze, her silence steady but not cold. Mrs. Gable lingered, then turned away, her footsteps fading down the narrow stairs. Anya tucked the photo back into her pocket, her fingers brushing the rough fabric of her uniform. The mansion's walls seemed to press in, heavy with the ghosts of those who'd failed before her. But she wasn't them. She was the 100th, and something in her stillness, her unyielding resolve, promised a different story. Serafina's cruelty was a storm, but Anya was a rock, weathered but unbroken. As the night deepened, the chandeliers below dimmed and the mansion settled into an uneasy quiet. Tomorrow would bring another test, another chance for Serafina to assert her dominion, but Anya's heart beat steadily, anchored by a boy's smile and a promise she'd die before breaking. The Thorn Mansion's air grew heavier with each passing day, as if Serafina's venom had seeped into its walls. Anya moved through her tasks like a shadow, her dark hands steady as she polished silver, dusted portraits, and scrubbed floors until they gleamed. But Serafina's gaze followed her, a predator circling prey. The white woman's emerald eyes burned with a need to break the 100th maid, to see her crumble where 99 others had fallen. Anya's silence, her unshaken calm, was a splinter under Serafina's skin, and she was determined to dig it out. It began with whispers, venomous and calculated. At breakfast, Serafina's voice cut through the clink of china. "Where's my sapphire brooch?" she demanded, her pale fingers drumming the table. The staff froze, eyes darting to Anya, who stood arranging napkins. "You were in my room yesterday," Serafina said, her tone ablade. "Empty your pockets." Anya met her gaze, unflinching, and turned out her apron pockets, empty save for a folded cloth. Serafina's lips twitched, her accusation dissolving into thin air, but her eyes promised retribution. The next strike came in the drawing room. Anya was dusting a shelf of porcelain figurines when Serafina swept in, her silk dress rustling like a storm. Without a word, she seized a delicate vase, white with gold filigree, and hurled it to the floor. Shards exploded across the hardwood, glittering like broken stars. "Careless girl," Serafina hissed, though Anya hadn't touched it. "Clean it up, or you're done." Anya knelt, gathering the fragments with care, her movements precise, her face a mask of calm. The staff watched, hushed, as Serafina's heels clicked away, her triumph soured by Anya's refusal to beg. By the third day, Serafina's patience snapped. The grand foyer, its marble floor a mirror of wealth, became her stage. Anya was scrubbing, her knees pressed to the cold stone, a bucket of soapy water at her side. The chandelier above cast prisms across her braids, a fleeting beauty in the sterile opulence. Serafina appeared, her shadow falling like a guillotine. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a faint scratch on the marble, barely visible in the light. "You call this work?" Anya's voice was steady, soft. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll fix it." She reached for her cloth, but Serafina's hand lashed out, seizing Anya's braid and yanking her head back. Pain flared, but Anya's eyes remained still, a lake undisturbed. Then came the slap, a crack that echoed like thunder, leaving a red imprint across Anya's cheek. The staff gasped, hidden in corners, but Anya didn't cry out. She held Serafina's gaze, her silence a wall no blow could breach. "You dare stare at me?" Serafina's voice trembled with rage, her control unraveling. Her eyes flicked to the bucket, and with a swift kick, she sent it crashing. Cold water surged over Anya, soaking her uniform, plastering it to her skin. The metallic clang of the bucket rang out, water pooling like a shattered mirror at her feet. Serafina stood over her, breathing hard, her pale face flushed. "Clean yourself up," she spat. "You're a disgrace." The foyer fell silent, the air thick with shock. Serafina expected tears, a plea, anything to affirm her power. But Anya rose, water dripping from her braids, her movements slow and deliberate. She righted the bucket, retrieved a mop, and began to clean, each stroke methodical, as if the assault had been a mere inconvenience. Her eyes, dark and unyielding, held no trace of fear. Serafina's hands clenched, her victory hollow, and she stormed off, her heels a staccato retreat. From the staircase, Mrs. Gable watched, her weathered hands gripping the railing. Her eyes, usually guarded, flickered with something new. Admiration, perhaps, or hope. She vanished before Anya could see her, but the weight of her gaze lingered. That evening in the dining hall, Mr. Julian Thorne broke his usual silence. His gray eyes, tired but kind, settled on Anya as she served wine. "Serafina," he said softly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Perhaps you're being too harsh. She works harder than most." Serafina's fork paused midair, her lips curling into a sneer. "Don't coddle her, Julian. She's no different from the rest." But her voice wavered, betraying a crack in her armor. Julian's gaze lingered on Anya, a silent acknowledgement before he returned to his meal. Alone in her attic room, Anya sat on her cot, the sting of the slap still warm on her cheek. She pulled out David's photo, its edges worn but precious. His smile steadied her, a beacon in the dark. She closed her eyes, letting his laughter echo in her mind. Serafina's cruelty was a fire, but Anya was forged in harder flames. She would endure, not for herself, but for the boy who needed her. The mansion's walls whispered of past defeats, but Anya's silence was a vow. She would not break. The Thorne mansion's shadows seemed to soften, as if the walls themselves sensed a shift after the storm in the foyer. Anya moved through her duties with the same quiet precision, her dark hands gliding over crystal decanters and velvet drapes, her braids swaying like a metronome of resolve. Serafina's absence since the water bucket incident hung heavy, a silence louder than her usual venom. The staff whispered in corners, their eyes darting to Anya, who bore the red mark on her cheek like a badge of endurance. Yet her calm unsettled them, as if she carried a secret they couldn't grasp. Late that night, as the mansion slept, Anya was tasked with dusting the library, a cavern of leather-bound books and mahogany shelves lit by a single lamp. She worked alone, her cloth tracing the spines of volumes untouched for years, when a sound stopped her, a soft, choked sob. She froze, peering through the stacks. There, in a corner by a towering window, sat Serafina, her white skin ghostly in the moonlight, her silk robe pooling around her like spilled ink. An album lay open in her lap, its pages yellowed, each photo a frozen memory of a woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. Julian's first wife. Anya's breath caught. She'd never seen Serafina like this, stripped of her regal armor. The woman's shoulders shook, her fingers clutching a photo as tears traced her sharp cheekbones. In that moment, Anya glimpsed the truth. Serafina wasn't just cruel. She was haunted. Memories flickered through Serafina's mind, unbidden and raw. Years ago, at glittering galas, Julian's family had whispered "gold digger" behind her back, their smiles cutting like glass. Friends had mocked her, questioning her place beside a man like Julian. To survive, she'd built a fortress of control, her cruelty a shield against weakness. But here, alone with ghosts, that fortress crumbled. Anya could have turned away. The sting of Serafina's slap still lingered. The cold of the water still clung to her skin. Yet something stirred in her, a quiet, stubborn compassion. She slipped to the kitchen, her steps silent on the marble floors. There, she warmed a glass of water, its steam curling like a prayer, and gathered a small box of tissues. Returning to the library, she placed them just outside the door, where the lamplight would catch them. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. Her act was a whisper, not a shout, a gesture that said she saw the woman beneath the tyrant. By morning, the mansion stirred with its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. Anya carried a breakfast tray to the dining hall, where Serafina sat, her emerald eyes dulled, her posture less rigid. The album was gone, but its weight seemed to linger in her gaze. As Anya set the tray down, porcelain clinking softly, Serafina's voice broke the silence. "Thank you," she said, the words stiff, almost foreign on her tongue. Her pale fingers hesitated, then curled into her palm, as if the admission cost her something vital. Anya nodded, her eyes steady but gentle, and moved on, leaving the moment to settle like dust. The staff noticed. A maid paused mid-sweep, her broom still. The cook glanced from the kitchen, his knife hovering over a carrot. Mrs. Gable, arranging flowers nearby, caught Anya's eye and gave a faint nod, her weathered face softening. The word thank you was a crack in Serafina's armor, small but undeniable, and it rippled through the mansion like a stone dropped in the still water. In her attic room that night, Anya sat on her cot, the flickering bulb casting shadows across the peeling walls. She held David's photo, its edges worn from her touch. His smile steadied her, a reminder of why she endured. But now another image lingered. Serafina, alone with her tears, clutching a past she couldn't escape. Anya's act of kindness wasn't weakness, it was a choice, born from a strength Serafina couldn't yet understand. She tucked the photo away, her heart heavy but resolute. The mansion's opulence hid countless scars, but Anya's compassion was a thread, stitching something new into its fabric. Mrs. Gable's words echoed in her mind. Don't let her see you're afraid. Anya wasn't afraid, not of Serafina's cruelty, nor of the ghost that haunted her, but she sensed a storm brewing, a reckoning that would test her resolve. Serafina's thank you was a flicker of light, but Anya knew it could just as easily be snuffed out. The mansion's walls held their breath, waiting for the next move in this silent war. As Anya closed her eyes, David's laughter filled her thoughts, a shield against whatever came next. The Thorn Mansion's air crackled with unspoken tension, as if Serafina's fleeting thank you had been a false dawn. Anya moved through her task with the same unyielding calm, her dark hands steady as she polished candelabras, her braids catching glints of morning light. But Serafina's eyes followed her, no longer dulled by vulnerability, but sharp with a restless hunger. That single word of gratitude offered in the dining hall had exposed a crack in her armor, and she loathed it. She needed control, needed to crush the quiet strength of the 100th maid who dared to unsettle her. It began with a violation. Late in the afternoon, while Anya was scrubbing linens in the laundry room, Serafina slipped into the attic chamber. Her pale fingers rifled through Anya's sparse belongings, a worn blanket, a cracked mirror, and there, tucked in a drawer, a photograph. David's smile, bright against the faded paper, seemed to mock her. Serafina's lips curled, her heart pounding with a mix of rage and triumph. She clutched the photo, her manicured nails digging into its edges, and headed for the garden. The thorn garden was a labyrinth of roses and ivy, its beauty masking thorns that snagged at Anya's uniform as she was summoned. She stood by a stone fountain, its water glinting under the late sun, her dark skin warmed by the light, but her eyes wary. Serafina emerged, her silk dress a slash of emerald against the greenery, the photo held high like a weapon. "So this is your secret," she sneered, her voice ablade. "This boy, this burden. You think he makes you special?" Anya's breath hitched, but her face remained still, a lake undisturbed. "He's my brother," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. Serafina's laugh was sharp, cutting through the garden's quiet. "Your brother? A sick child is dragging you down. You're nothing but a fool, slaving away for a lost cause." She stepped closer, her pale face flushed with venom. "You think you can defy me? You're nothing." The staff lingered at the garden's edge, drawn by the rising voices. Mrs. Gable stood among them, her weathered hands clenched, her eyes fixed on Anya. Serafina held the photo higher, her fingers trembling with intent. "This," she said, "is your weakness." With a swift, deliberate motion, she tore the photo in two, then four, the pieces fluttering to the grass like ash. The sound of ripping paper was a wound, slicing through the air. The staff gasped, a collective intake of breath, but Anya didn't move. Her eyes locked on the fragments, each one a piece of David's smile. Pain twisted in her chest, sharp and raw, but she refused to let it spill. She knelt, her movements common crawl, movements slow, almost reverent as she gathered the pieces. Her dark hands moved with a quiet dignity, each fragment cradled like a relic. Serafina watched, her breath ragged, expecting surrender. But Anya rose, the torn photo clutched in her hand, and met Serafina's gaze. Her voice, when it came, was soft but unshakable, a blade of truth wrapped in calm. "I pity you," she said, her words clear and piercing. "You think this breaks me, but it only shows how empty you are." The words struck like lightning. Serafina's face crumpled, her emerald eyes wide with shock, then flooded with tears. Her hands shook, the triumph she'd sought dissolving into ash. She staggered back, a sob breaking free, raw and unfiltered. Her fortress of control collapsed, leaving her exposed, a woman undone by her cruelty. The garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses silent witnesses to her unraveling. Mr. Julian appeared at the garden's entrance, his gray eyes heavy with a sorrow that needed no words. He'd seen it all, the photo, the tearing, Anya's quiet strength. His gaze settled on Serafina, not with anger but with a deep, aching disappointment that cut deeper than any shout. She turned away, her sobs muffled as she fled into the mansion, leaving Anya kneeling in the grass, the pieces of her brother's smile still in her hands. Anya remained there, alone, as the sun dipped below the horizon. The staff dispersed, their whispers trailing like leaves in the wind. Mrs. Gable lingered a moment, her eyes soft with unspoken respect, then vanished into the shadows. Anya pressed the torn photo to her chest, her heart steady despite the ache. David's smile was more than paper. It lived in her, unbreakable. The garden's thorns gleamed in the fading light, but Anya was no longer just the 100th maid. She was a force, and the mansion would never be the same. The Thorn Mansion exhaled, its opulent halls cloaked in an unfamiliar quiet after the garden's tempest. Serafina's absence left a void, her door locked, her venomous presence replaced by a stillness that felt both fragile and heavy. Anya moved through her tasks, her dark hands steady as she folded linens and swept corridors, the faint red mark on her cheek a fading echo of cruelty. The staff watched her with new eyes, their whispers softer, tinged with awe. The 100th maid had faced Serafina's worst and emerged unbroken, her silence a force that reshaped the air around her. Serafina remained cloistered in her chambers, the heavy curtains drawn against the morning light. Behind closed doors, she sat on the edge of her bed, her pale fingers twisting the silk of her robe. The memory of Anya's words, "I pity you," burned like a brand, stripping away the armor she'd worn for years. She saw Julian's eyes heavy with disappointment and the torn fragments of a boy's smile scattering in the grass. Shame coiled in her chest, a snake she couldn't shake. She'd sought to break Anya, but it was her foundation that crumbled, leaving her to face the hollowness of her cruelty. In the dining hall, Anya set out silverware, her braids swaying with each measured step. The staff moved cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the fragile calm. A maid hesitated near her, then offered a shy nod, a small gesture of solidarity. The cook slipped her an extra roll, his gruff, "Keep your strength up," carrying a warmth that hadn't existed before. Anya accepted it with a quiet nod, her eyes steady but distant, her thoughts anchored to the boy whose torn photo now rested in her pocket, pieced together with care. Mid-afternoon, Mr. Julian found her in the conservatory where she was pruning roses under glass panes that caught the sun's fleeting rays. His gray suit was impeccable, but his eyes carried a weariness that matched the mansion's quiet. He stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as her shears snipped a wilted bloom. "Anya," he said, his voice low, deliberate, "thank you for staying. I've seen many come and go, but none with your strength." His gaze lingered on her, a respect that needed no embellishment. "You've changed something here, even if she can't admit it yet." Anya paused, her dark hand still on the shears. "I stay for my brother, sir," she said softly, her voice steady but carrying a weight that made Julian's eyes soften further. "But I see her pain too. It doesn't excuse her, but I see it." Julian nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line, as if her words stirred something deep. He turned to leave, then paused. "You're more than she deserves," he said, almost to himself, before walking away, his footsteps echoing in the glass-walled room. That evening, as Anya climbed the narrow stairs to her attic room, she found a small tray outside her door. A bowl of steaming soup, carrots and thyme, fragrant and warm, sat beside a single bandage, its white gauze stark against the worn wood. No note, No explanation, but Anya knew. Mrs. Gable, ever watchful, had left this offering, a quiet acknowledgement of the mark on Anya's cheek, the battle she'd endured. Anya carried the tray inside, the warmth of the bowl seeping into her hands, a contrast to the cold water that had soaked her days before. As she sipped the soup, Mrs. Gable appeared at the door, her gray hair catching the dim light. Her face, usually a mask of duty, softened with something like reverence. "I've been here since the first Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice a hushed confession. "She was kind, but this place, it's been cold since she left. You've changed it, Anya, more than anyone before you." Her eyes held Anya's for a moment, then she turned away, leaving the words to settle in the quiet. Anya sat on her cot, the flickering bulb casting shadows across the peeling walls. She pulled out David's photo, its pieces carefully taped together, his smile fractured but whole in her heart. Mrs. Gable's words echoed, a reminder that her presence rippled beyond herself. The mansion was no longer just a battlefield. It was a place where cracks were forming, not just in Serafina, but in the very fabric of this house. Anya's fingers traced David's face, her resolve unshaken. She wasn't here to win a war, but to keep a promise. Yet she sensed the tide turning, the silence after the storm carrying a whisper of change. The mansion's halls lay quiet, but the air held a new weight, a promise, or perhaps a warning. Serafina's isolation couldn't last forever. Anya closed her eyes, David's laughter steadying her. Whatever came next, she was ready. The Thorne mansion's quiet held a new cadence, like a heart finding its rhythm after a storm. Anya moved through her tasks with steady grace, her dark hands folding linens and wiping down banisters, her braids catching faint glimmers from the chandeliers. The staff no longer whispered in fear. Their glances toward her carried a quiet reverence, as if her resilience had woven a new thread into the mansion's tapestry. Serafina's absence lingered, her locked door a silent confession, but the air hinted at something stirring, an ember of change in a house long chilled by cruelty. In her attic room that evening, Anya found an unexpected gift. On the scarred wooden table, beside her flickering bulb, sat a sleek digital photo frame, its screen glowing with a familiar image. David, his smile radiant, his brown eyes alive with mischief. The torn photo from the garden, once fractured, was whole again, meticulously restored. No note, no signature, but Anya knew. Her breath caught, a mix of surprise and wary hope. She traced the frame's edge, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear but from the weight of this unspoken apology. Serafina emerged the next morning, her pale face drawn, her emerald eyes clouded with something softer than rage. She found Anya in the breakfast room, arranging a tray of croissants, the scent of butter mingling with the morning's hush. The staff hovered at the edges, sensing a shift but wary of its fragility. Serafina's silk dress rustled as she approached, her steps hesitant, her voice low. "The frame," she said, the words catching in her throat like unpracticed notes. "Did you see it?" Anya met her gaze, her dark eyes steady but not cold. "I did, ma'am," she said softly. "It's beautiful." The word hung between them, fragile as glass. Serafina's fingers twisted together, her usual poise fraying. "I had it made," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The photo, I shouldn't have," she faltered, her pale cheeks flushing with the effort of honesty. Anya set down the tray, her movements deliberate, and spoke with a quiet strength. "His name is David," she said. "He has a heart condition. Every day I work here is for him, for his surgery, for his chance to live." Her voice held no accusation, only truth, each word a bridge extended across a chasm. Serafina's eyes widened, a flicker of pain crossing her face. She saw David's smile in her mind, no longer a taunt, but a mirror to her own buried wounds. The staff watched, breath held, as the moment stretched. Serafina nodded, a small, jerky motion, and turned away, her heels clicking softly as she retreated. Anya stood still, the tray forgotten, her heart steady but heavy. She'd shared a piece of herself, not out of weakness, but as a gift, a chance for Serafina to see beyond her pain. That evening in the study, Mr. Julian found Serafina staring out a window, the dusk painting her pale skin in shades of gold. Her hands clutched the sill, her knuckles white. "You did something good today," he said, his voice gentle but firm, cutting through her silence. "Restoring that photo. I haven't seen you do something so meaningful in years, Serafina." His gray eyes held hers, not with judgment, but with a quiet plea. "You could be more than this place allows." Serafina's lips parted, but no words came. She turned back to the window, her reflection a ghost in the glass. But Julian's words lingered, a spark in the dark. In her attic room, Anya sat with the digital frame, David's smile looping endlessly, a beacon against the peeling walls. She thought of Serafina's faltering voice, the weight of her confession. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a crack, a fissure in the wall between them. Anya's fingers brushed the frame, her thoughts drifting to David's laughter, his fragile heart beating miles away. She'd come to this mansion for him, but now she saw another purpose, to show Serafina that cruelty wasn't her only path. Mrs. Gable passed by, her shadow pausing at the door. She didn't speak, but her eyes held a quiet pride, as if she sensed the tide turning. The mansion's halls, once cold, seemed to hum with possibility. Anya tucked the frame beside her cot, its glow a small light in the dark. Serafina's gesture was a step, but the road ahead was uncertain. Anya closed her eyes, David's smile anchoring her. The mansion waited, its silence no longer oppressive but expectant, ready for what came next. The Thorne mansion pulsed with a newfound warmth, as if the walls had begun to breathe after years of holding their breath. Anya moved through her duties, her dark hands steady as she arranged vases and polished mirrors, her braids swaying under the soft glow of sconces. The staff no longer shrank from shadows. Their steps were lighter, their voices tinged with cautious hope. Serafina's hesitant gesture, the digital frame glowing with David's smile, had cracked the mansion's icy facade, and now something brighter was seeping through. In the grand dining hall, mid-morning light streamed through tall windows, casting golden patterns across the mahogany table. Serafina stood at its head, her silk dress a muted blue, her pale face no longer sharp with disdain, but softened by resolve. The staff gathered, summoned by her rare call, their eyes flickering between curiosity and wariness. Anya stood at the back, her dark eyes calm but alert, the digital frame's glow still fresh in her mind. "I've made a decision," Serafina said, her voice steady but stripped of its usual venom. Her emerald eyes swept the room, pausing on Anya. "The Thorne family foundation will cover the full cost of a surgery for Anya's brother, David." A murmur rippled through the staff, a mix of shock and disbelief. Serafina raised a hand, silencing them. "It's not charity," she continued, her tone firm but not cruel. "It's what's right." Her gaze lingered on Anya, a silent acknowledgement of the photo she'd torn, the boy she'd mocked. "I hope it's enough," she added almost to herself before turning away, her heels clicking softly as she left. The room erupted in whispers. The cook's knife paused mid-chop, a maid's broom stilled, and Mrs. Gable's weathered hands tightened around a tray. Anya stood rooted, her breath shallow, the weight of Serafina's words sinking in. David's surgery, the dream that had anchored her through every blow, every insult, was now within reach. Her dark fingers brushed the pocket where his taped-together photo rested, her heart pounding with a hope she dared not name. By afternoon, the mansion buzzed with a new energy. The staff's glances toward Anya held not just respect, but something warmer, kinship. The cook pressed a warm biscuit into her hand, muttering, "For strength." A maid smiled shyly as she passed, her broom moving with a lighter sweep. Mrs. Gable caught Anya's eye in the corridor, her nod carrying a quiet pride, as if she'd known all along that the 100th maid would rewrite this house's story. That evening, Anya found a letter slipped under her attic door, the envelope marked with David's familiar scrawl. She sat on her cot, the flickering bulb casting a soft halo over the peeling walls. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, unfolding a single sheet filled with a child's earnest handwriting. "Dear Anya," it began, "you're my superhero, The doctors say I'll be okay now because of you. I want to be a doctor someday, to help people like you do. I love you." A small drawing of a heart, lopsided but bright, adorned the bottom. Anya pressed the letter to her chest, tears brimming but not falling. David's words were a melody, a promise kept against all odds. In the study, Mr. Julian found Serafina by the fireplace, its flames casting shadows across her pale face. She stared into the fire, her hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. "You did more than restore a photo today," he said, his voice low, warm with a pride she hadn't heard in years. "You gave a boy a future, Serafina. That's who you can be." She didn't meet his eyes, but her lips trembled. A faint nod, her only reply. Julian rested a hand on her shoulder, a silent vow to stand by her as she rebuilt what she'd broken. Anya, in her room, tucked David's letter beside the digital frame, its glowing image, a beacon in the dark. She thought of Serafina's words in the dining hall, the weight of her choice. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a bridge, fragile but real. Anya's purpose had been David, but now she saw another, to show Serafina a path beyond cruelty. The mansion's halls, once cold, hummed with possibility, their silence no longer a threat but a canvas for change. Mrs. Gable passed by, her shadow lingering at the door. "You've done more than survive," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years. "You've made this place live again." Anya met her gaze, her silence a nod to their shared understanding. The mansion waited, its walls no longer heavy with ghosts but alive with the promise of tomorrow. Anya closed her eyes, David's heart-drawn letter steadying her. Serafina's act was a beginning, but the story wasn't over. The Thorn Mansion shimmered with a quiet radiance, as if its walls had shed their last traces of frost. Anya moved through her task with a lighter step, her dark hands arranging flowers in crystal vases, her braids catching the morning's glow. The staff mirrored her ease, their voices soft with laughter, their movements free of fear. Serafina's decision to fund David's surgery had ignited a spark, and now the mansion burned with a warmth it hadn't known in years. The air hummed with possibility, a house no longer bound by ghosts but alive with second chances. Weeks had passed since Serafina's announcement, and news arrived like a sunrise. David's surgery was a success. Anya received the call in the kitchen, the receiver trembling in her hands as the doctor's voice confirmed her brother's new lease on life. She sank against the counter, tears brimming but held back, her dark eyes bright with a joy too vast for words. The cook, chopping onions nearby, grinned and slid a warm scone her way. "For the hero," he said, his gruff voice warm. Anya smiled, the weight of her promise to David lifting like mist. Serafina had changed. The woman who once ruled with venom now moved with a quiet purpose. She spent mornings in the study, poring over foundation papers, her pale fingers tracing budgets for orphanages and clinics. Her silk dresses were simpler now, her emerald eyes softer, no longer cutting but searching. She spoke to the staff by name, her voice free of disdain. A maid dropped a tray, and Serafina only smiled, waving off the apology. "It's just a plate," she said, her tone light, almost human. The staff exchanged glances, their awe tinged with disbelief, as if the mansion itself had rewritten its rules. One evening, Serafina found Anya in the sunroom, where ivy-framed windows let in the dusk's golden light. A tablet rested on the table, ready for a video call. "Anya," Serafina said, her voice tentative but warm, "will you watch with me? David's call. It's today." Anya paused, her dark hands still on a vase, her eyes meeting Serafina's. The invitation was a bridge, built from the ashes of a torn photo. "I'd like that, ma'am," she replied, her voice soft but steady, a nod to the woman Serafina was becoming. They sat together, the tablet screen flickering to life. David appeared, his smile wide, his brown eyes sparkling with health. He waved, his voice bubbling through the speakers. "Anya, I'm running again. The doctors say I'm a miracle." His laughter filled the room, a melody that warmed the air. Anya's lips curved, her heart swelling as she leaned closer. Serafina watched, her pale face softened by a smile that held no trace of her former self. "He's beautiful," she said quietly, her eyes glistening. Like his sister. Anya met her gaze, the weight of their journey settling between them. You gave him this chance, she said, her voice a quiet gift. Thank you. Serafina's breath hitched, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. No, Anya, she said, her voice breaking. You taught me what strength is. I was lost, and you showed me the way. The words hung like sunlight, warm and unyielding, a truth neither could deny. Mr. Julian entered, his gray eyes catching the scene. He paused, his suit softened by the dusk's glow, and placed a hand on Serafina's shoulder. His touch was gentle, a silent vow of pride and support. You've both done something extraordinary, he said, his voice low, his smile encompassing them both. He sat beside them, the tablet's light casting shadows that danced across their faces. A family forged not by blood, but by healing. Anya's fingers brushed a small notebook on the table, its pages filled with notes for a nursing course she'd enrolled in. David's dream of becoming a doctor had sparked her own, a future where she could heal others as she'd helped heal this house. The sunroom's windows glowed, sunlight spilling through like a promise, bathing the room in warmth. The mansion was no longer a battlefield but a home, its walls alive with laughter and light. Mrs. Gable passed by, her gray hair catching the golden rays. She paused, her weathered face softening as she watched the trio. This house lives again, she murmured, her voice a whisper of gratitude before slipping away. Anya looked at Serafina, then Julian, their shared silence a testament to what they'd built. You gave my brother a new life, Anya said, her voice steady, a final gift. Serafina's eyes shimmered, her smile fragile but true. And you gave me one too. The tablet looped David's laughter, a sound that filled the room, the mansion, the heart. The Thorn estate, once a house of thorns, was now a sanctuary, its story rewritten by two women who'd found peace in each other's strength. The Thorn Mansion's story of Anya's unyielding strength and Serafina's redemption ends with a heart made whole, a house reborn. What did their journey stir in you? Did Anya's silence inspire you, or did Serafina's change spark hope? Share your thoughts below. Where are you listening from, and what moved you most? Your voices bring this tale to life. Thank you for joining us, for feeling every tear in triumph. Your support lights our path, just as Anya lit hers. Until our next story, when we'll meet again in a new world of courage and heart, keep carrying your light. Stay with us. There's more to come.